answer them hopefully as they come in, or we will just wait until the end as well and cover them all. So I will turn it over to Emily.
Hi. Thanks, everybody. Uh,
I muted.
those. Oh,
I unmuted you.
thank you. It's going back and forth. So hi, I'm Emily. I'm the Rural Programs Coordinator at Rethos, which is the new name of the Preservation Alliance in Minnesota. So we've been around for years and years and years, but we gave ourselves a new name last year. Most of my work is with the Minnesota Main Street program, so including Winona, but communities all over the state. And we also do downtown assessment and consulting work as well. So very much out in the community work, but most of the time, not most of the time, my office is at my house. So everything's a little weird now with the COVID pandemic, but here is my how I figured out how to work at home process. Can you see my screen? Is it there? Great. Why isn't it advancing? Ooh. Okay, so before COVID kicked in, I would work at home 3 or 4 days a week. The winter a little bit more often, but once really March hit, I was on the road at least 1 day a week. So I would travel really regularly to St. Paul and the surrounding communities that are Main Street communities. So I worked at home, but I still got a lot of interaction with people. And if I wasn't on the road, I would have friends or people that worked from home in Winona that I would collaborate with, or we would get together and work together so that I wasn't completely isolated all the time. I'm a people person. And so while I really value the productivity of working at home by myself, I liked to be around other people. And honestly, having a little bit of a change of scenery is helpful. It was nice to be able to go to Blooming Grounds in the morning and work for a couple hours and then come home and work in the afternoon, or work at a friend's house who also works at home. I have found, though, that by not being in an office setting, my productivity skyrocketed because I don't get phone calls as much, and people don't just walk through the door to talk to you. So I can get things done in 3 hours that in an office setting used to take me an entire day. I also, right now, I'm on the board of Visit Winona and volunteer with a couple other groups. So I would still get to be out for meetings and get to interact with people in a really different way. So I wasn't totally isolated by myself all the time. So when I first started working at home, I didn't have a firm schedule. I would be in different rooms in my house. Sometimes I'd work at the kitchen table, and sometimes I'd work on the couch, and sometimes I'd work on the front porch. I didn't have a designated workspace. And I allowed my workday to be really nebulous. If I'd start later, I'd work later, or I'd start and stop. And it was just kind of willy-nilly, whatever worked. That lasted about 3 weeks before I realized that was not good for me. I know some people who do work really well that way, or work almost a second shift at home because they're able to do that. That is not for me. I felt really unproductive because I didn't have a focused work time. And I felt really reactionary, that I was just dealing with workload stuff as it came in, instead of being really planned about my day or knowing what I needed to take care of in a week. I really like lists. I really like having my calendar up on a bulletin board. And so the fact that I didn't got to me very, very quickly. So pretty fast after I started working at home, within the first month, I realized I needed to be a little more rigid with myself. And so I started a schedule. I'm still up. I am a sort of morning person, not like starting work at 6:30 a.m., but I try to be at work at 8 a.m. I still get up, get ready, make breakfast. I say, bye, I'm going to work. And my office is in our basement. So I go down the steps and go to work. I tell my husband and my animals goodbye, and I go to my office, which is a dedicated workspace. We're lucky we have enough space in our house that I can have a dedicated workspace that I really only use for work. I don't use for other stuff as much, and that helps kind of keep that work home mentality spaced out in my brain. And I've limited how I am letting my work flow into my regular life. I even got like a Google phone number so that I can turn that on and off so that I'm not getting calls about work at 8 o'clock at night, because my cell phone is my work phone as well. And that has been really helpful for me to allow boundaries in my workday. It helps me be productive, and it helps me feel less stressed out when my workday is over. I also learned pretty quickly that I personally don't do well with overlapping work tasks with home tasks. So I don't do well folding laundry during a webinar. I can't start something for dinner and do a few things and run back up. That doesn't work for me. I have to be working or not working. I know different folks feel differently about that, but that's how it works for me. I know that I can make this happen in a different way than others because I don't have kids. I have flexibility to do what I need to do, and I don't have other little people that I have to be considering with my schedule. And so I know that is a luxury that I have that other folks don't have. I have pets that really like schedules too, and I do well with having specified plans for my day and for my week so that I know what's coming at me. That really helps me be spontaneous when I need to be. What's different now? I'm home all the time. Before, I worked from home, but I was still on the road interacting with people quite a bit. So I would have a ton of really intense interaction, go home, recharge, get my files in order, and then go back out. As you can see, I have a lot of very lazy colleagues around my house who are very distracting when I'm home all the time. And my travel is pretty much canceled for the foreseeable future. We've done with Rethos, we've done some significant reallocating of our travel dollars to be able to support the Main Street programs differently, which means that any travel that we had planned is pretty much cut because we're using those dollars for other, frankly, more important projects right now. So it's going to be strange for the rest of the year for me. Missing that one-on-one interaction is really hard. I know there are a lot of people out there like me that it gets a little hard to feel positive about yourself and the work that you're doing when you don't have somebody to bounce ideas off or talk things through in person. And the only way you can do that is through screen time. And screen time can be hard. I mean, we were talking at our staff meeting last week that when you're on a Zoom meeting like this, you see yourself reacting. And so then you think about how you're reacting and you're constantly gauging your emotions really differently. And it's forcing you to work in a different manner than you're usually working. And that's tough. Just the general disruption that COVID has brought has made for a major pivot in our work plan for the year. We had a pretty intense schedule that we follow pretty closely, and that's just out the window when we've had to start back at square one, which it's weird to be replanning a year in the springtime. Usually you're thinking about your year-long calendars in December, January, getting prepared. To start fresh in the spring is strange. So I have changed my work at home process quite a bit since everything with the pandemic started. I do give myself a little bit more flexibility. For example, when we had that really rainy stretch, when there was a break with sun, I would go walk the dogs right now because I know going for a sunny walk than a rainy walk made me feel better. So I was able to come and go. I have that flexibility with my job that I'm able to come and go a little bit more. So if I take 2 hours in the middle of the afternoon, I'll come back and work a little later in the evening. There's less, right now, I'm curious if other folks feel this way. There's less immediate pressure. It felt like at the beginning of COVID, there was such a need for immediate responses and very fast pivots from original plans, and now it seems like we've been given a little bit of a cushion. Some days are more urgent than others, though. We've got deadlines still and plans that we have to make, and we're also, as an organization, I'm very thankful that we've allowed ourselves kind of some grief space in our schedule, realizing that some grants that we were working on aren't going to happen or are going to be pushed to another year, or some projects we were working on in specific communities simply aren't going to happen anymore, and considering ways that we could find alternatives to still work them into the year. But feeling things about that is important, because we know that it is hard to just immediately change and not deal with the grief of what's going on. So things that are still a challenge that I'm working through are that video meetings are really draining. And when you have 4 or 5 hours of a video meeting or a Zoom or whatever during the day, it's taxing, and your brain needs a break in a different way that it would sitting in an all-day educational session with folks. It's hard to plan for a world that you don't know what it looks like in 2 weeks, let alone in 2 months or 2 years. So we're still trying to figure out, how do we delicately balance not knowing but still planning? I've had to teach myself new ways to be okay with limited interaction. I feel like I've been less productive because I don't get to interact with people in the same way, but I've still been able to find things that work for me. One thing that's really hard is I hear firsthand about just how devastating COVID is on small businesses. That's who we work with constantly, and giving myself some grief space to be able to emotionally handle what we're doing is a lot, and it's a different challenge than we normally would be facing. And just reminding myself that I'm at home working during a pandemic, not just working at home business as usual, and that has been helpful to me to be reminded that everything's a little weird. Everybody's feeling strange pressures, and it's a little scary, and that has been a good help for me. So that's my working at home experience. Cynthia, I'll pass it over to you.
Cynthia, I will unmute you. Maybe. Cynthia,
There you
okay,
go.
there you go.
Sorry, I muted myself as well, just to triple, quadruple.
I like it.
Okay, hang on 1 second. So this is just a brief presentation, sharing some of, kind of my best tips from working at home. I'm a freelance contractor, and I've worked from home about 80% since 2012 and 100% since 2016. I have a number of different clients that I do work for, but my biggest client is Visit Winona. And so I've learned a few things along the way, and I understand how hard this is for people who've never done it before, because this is the me that people are, I hope, seeing in the workplace. And so even when I'm digital, this is who I want them to see me as. But the reality is that working from home is hard, and some days are harder than others. And this is a lot more often my reality than that nice headshot. And yep, that's 3 cats, and that's a bird cage, and that was me trying to work on my dining room table. And I would like to say this was like 5 years ago, but this was actually about 2 weeks ago. So I do have a space that I go to now, like for things like this, but every now and then I'm just optimistic enough that I can get something done to try to sit in public spaces in my house, and that is really never going to work. So some basics that I think that we probably all who've done it for a little bit would agree on. A routine is great, and by a routine, I also mean, you know, the starting, stopping, and also letting yourself have breaks, and also letting yourself have lunch, and creating that schedule, but then actually sticking to that schedule. Because if you cheat yourself out of, you know, lunch or breaks, or if you don't give yourself any of that time, I think it does start to burn you out a little bit. I also find, I have found that days when I'm just really having trouble getting my head around being at work, walking from the kitchen with my coffee to my computer wearing my slippers and pajamas isn't always helpful. So sometimes I need to get dressed in order to just sit down and be in the right headspace for work. And sometimes that really, honest to God, is even just brushing my hair. Let's see, having a dedicated space for work. And I don't just mean like right now I have this office space that I can go into, but also, even if you don't have that kind of space, having just a corner that is undisturbable, because I know, you know, when all of my kids lived at home, especially, they would clean things or they would move things, and if I was not being careful with the things that I was working on, I would lose notepads for, you know, a week. I would have no idea where this notepad went in, and it was because I didn't have a good place where everything was just sitting all the time. So having that dedicated space is, and it just becomes a do not touch pile, and all your stuff is there, and your family hopefully, you know, understands not to disturb it for any reason, even if it's on fire. Well, maybe if it's on fire. So also this do not disturb rule, and people and animals being expected to follow it. When you have kids, it's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. They saw me as being at home, and so I'm not working. And so I was, you know, interrupted pretty continually throughout my day. I'm laughing because right before this started, my daughter just popped in, you know, and I'm like, I'm working right now. So she's sitting watching the presentation too. But I mean, you know, it's a reality that when people see us, they feel like we're accessible. And so I had to have, you know, just some really hard talks with my kids about when they could and couldn't talk to me, and like what was important enough to interrupt me. And if they heard me on the phone, like the only thing that would be important enough is if they or something else in the house was on fire. And so you know, it took a long time though. And so for anybody who's just now working at home and who's got kids who are also stuck at home, I don't envy you. I know that that's really tough, but you just have to be consistent. It doesn't mean you're being mean. You just have to be consistent and insist that that's your time, that's your space, that's your workspace, and you're not to be interrupted. And that goes for cats too. Like, for example, I am sitting here doing this presentation, and right before Emily tossed it to me, I had a cat scratch. I have these nice sliding pocket doors. I had a cat scratching at the door because it's not locked up right now, and it wants to come in here. So I had to pick up something off my desk and throw it at the door. And that's, you know, just like, have soft things so you don't wreck anything. But seriously, like, animals can be worse than kids. Sometimes when I have been on phone calls and whatnot, I heard Emily say she was going to go lock up her animals, and I've had to do the same thing because they don't understand the rules like your humans might. So anyway, those are kind of some basics that I think work for probably everyone in some fashion or another. Here's a few things that I learned, kind of most of them the hard way. I think that working during normal hours when possible, or if that's what you normally would do for your job, are important. And I don't say that so that you make sure you get enough work done. I say that so that you don't get too much work done. Working from home, I found it became really blurry where my work hours were, and especially if I wanted to spend too much time during the day, or I wanted to go shopping or things like that, and I'd start pushing my work into the evening or pushing it into the weekend. And if you can keep a good balance and do that sometimes, I think it's okay, and it's a nice treat for working at home. But if you do that often enough, what started to happen to me is that I was working all the time. I could work all night, I could work all day, I could work all day Saturday, and I just didn't have any good boundaries anymore for when my work was getting done, and I lost my work-life balance. And so if you find yourself working at home and you don't have a work structure setting where you're on phone meetings all day or something like that, no one is, checking your hours, what time you punch in and punch out, keeping it confined to a normal work day is probably going to keep a better balance for you. For me, I make lists. I am a list maker. They're all over my house and my car and in my purse. I make lists of things that I need to do right now and things I need to do this week. And so you'll find these lists laying everywhere because they have to do with what am I going to get from my kitchen? What am I going to do for my work? What clients do I need to remember? Things that I don't remember right now, or I don't need to remember right now, but I need to remember tomorrow. I think that it can help productivity a lot. If you just have goals, these are the things that I need to get done today. And it can also just help, I think, sharpen focus. Some other practical things, and I heard a couple people talking about this while we were getting ready to start, and it's absolutely true, is your Wi-Fi is going to be strained right now more than it probably ever has been, especially with all these people working from home. I know that my service has certainly slowed down. You might need to bone up on your router, and you might need to talk to your internet provider about broader gigahertz or faster gigahertz. That is to compete with all of the people right now who are using all this bandwidth who usually aren't. And so the internet can be pretty unreliable right now. And for that reason, also, I strongly, strongly urge you to have, if you're reliant on the internet to do your work, to get some sort of a backup hotspot, because it will save you. It has saved me. I have a hotspot through my cell phone provider, and I live in town, and my internet goes down some days, and I mean, who knows why? It just does, and I'm out of commission. Like completely off the grid and out of commission if I don't have a backup to get back online. My work stops in some cases, so backup Wi-Fi is a great idea. So a few more things. I use time trackers, and there's a whole bunch of different products out there. There's a lot of free versions of time tracking. You can install them on your computer. You can install them, just so that they open when you open a browser. But anyway, but I think I've tried all these. I've tried Rescue Time, Toggle, and Top Tracker. Rescue Time has kind of been the one that I gravitate to, and maybe it's just because it has a good free version. It's pretty user friendly. But anyway, it will show you how you're spending your day. If you really wanted to just have a touchstone on how you're spending time, a time tracker is a great way to do it. And I promise you will be surprised. And it will log time for every window that you open on your computer, and you'll be surprised. So a couple other things I learned the hard way, and this is understanding remote meeting technology. Like, for example, these computer microphones are very sensitive. I have birds in the other room, and I'm partly tuned out to the sound of it, but also it doesn't seem very loud to me. And people have commented many times about, like, oh, do you have birds? What kind of birds do you have? And so just, we are working at home, and so people have to expect there's going to be some normal home sounds, but just understand that these are sensitive, and it's going to pick up a lot more than you think. You might want to get a headset and plug it into your computer. Also, just because you can't see yourself on the screen doesn't mean that I can't see you or that other people can't see you on the screen. And I think we've all seen the funny memes online right now about, like, husbands walking in their underwear while the wife's not eating and stuff. But I actually learned that the hard way one time as well, where the person was sharing their screen with me, and so it just didn't occur to me that they couldn't see me. And so I got up and went to the kitchen and got something to drink. And anyway, I was embarrassed. It was, it was stupid of me. I just didn't understand the technology very well. Same thing, the tabs that you have open on the top of your browser, if you're sharing a screen that includes your browser, just be aware that they're going to see every tab you have open in your browser, just in case, I don't know what you're looking at, but I don't know if you want everyone to know what you're looking at, even if it's just that you're shopping, for plants or underwear or whatever. Another thing that I just think it has to be reminded, and you have to give yourself permission to do it, and you have to actually do it, is get out of the house. Because I find that I can become sort of a hermit from working at home, and I literally can spend 3 or 4 days in my house and never speak in person to another person and never leave my house. And that's not good for you. So getting outside is, I think, so important. But here's the thing. Sometimes I just think that we're busy and we think, oh, I'm going to run to the store or whatever. And so this is what I think I'm leaving my house looking like. I think how we see ourselves and how we actually are can be different. And this was me in the parking lot at the store about a week ago. And yes, this was after I came out of the store. I looked down and I realized that my shirt was inside out and backwards. And I just shopped for like a half an hour in Target that way. So just being funny about that. But seriously, I actually have also walked into the store wearing my slippers. I just forget I have them on. So, we can get kind of blurry on our home selves and our outside of the home selves when we're working at home. But I think that just a little bit of thinking differently about how you do it is going to make it survivable for us during this really challenging time. And that's all I have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Cynthia. And now we're going to kind of go into a Q&A session with all 3 of our panelists here, but we're going to start with Diane so she can tell us a little bit about herself, introduce herself, and tell us a little bit about working at home and her experiences.
Thank you. Boy, a lot of what has been already said is just exactly how I feel. It's been roughly 19 years that I've been working from home. And so I started out with my own business about 8 years and then went into working for someone else. So there's a huge dynamic difference between working for yourself and working for someone else when you're at home. And then now I've been back working on my own since 2009 in my home. So I really understand what Emily and Cynthia said. I'm just curious out there. I know I can't see all of you, but how many of you right now are working for someone? Can you put your hand up for those that, and I know I can't see everyone's screen. Okay. And then how many of you are self-employed? Okay, so because I can't, people's faces are just now coming on. I see you've got your thumbs up. So there's enough of both for me to talk both. And when I was working for someone else, I was to the letter. I was making sure that 8 o'clock I was down on my computer. I made sure that I was done at 5 o'clock. I follow the rules. As a matter of fact, I spoke to someone yesterday who said that their employer knows when their mouse doesn't move because it turns orange on the screen. So everyone all day long and night is moving their mouse to turn it green, which shows their employer that they're working. So I thought that was fascinating because being self-employed, that's not the case. I've let up a lot of the rules. I understand that when I'm working for myself, if I don't work, I don't get to eat. That kind of a sense of urgency really changes the game. But I do speaking and training on leadership, conflict resolution. I travel all over, primarily southeastern Minnesota when there's not a pandemic, about 40,000 miles a year on my car. And I miss that. And so when you're home all the time, this is a lonely business. And it was lonely prior to the pandemic, and it's even more lonely now because we can't get to those coffee shops and client meetings. So I make a point once a day, I go into Winona. I live about 18 miles south of Winona. I make sure I go in. I have an errand to run. I need, meet with someone lunch-wise if it's someone I'm quarantined with or someone I can have great distance with outside, but it's really important for me to get out and have that break. And really everything else that Emily and Cynthia have talked about are wonderful, wonderful tips. I think one other thing I would add is to have compassion on yourself. This isn't for you. For those of you that are just doing this for the first time, please know that there's going to be mistakes, that you're not going to do it right, that you're learning as you go, and just have compassion. This is something that takes an adjustment, and you're going to be distracted. And I find lists really, really help. Now, I am not a list maker. I think I have fought that since day one, but I know I'm more productive when I have a list. I talked to someone yesterday on the phone, and she makes a list at night. So right before bed, she writes the 3 critical tasks she's going to do the next day. And that actually helps her sleep better because it says she's got structure the next day and that she knows what she's going to go after. It helps her get up at 8, be at the desk at 8 o'clock, ready to go. So for some of you doing that the night before, but I do know I'm more productive when I do have those lists. A couple other points that I'll add that I didn't hear Emily and Cynthia talk about so much, but they touched on it, is I am, again, having compassion for myself. I'm having to do a lot of video conferencing. I'm putting on presentations now with this. And, you know, the tips include taking that microphone an inch higher than your eyes so that you're actually talking into the audience. Another is the lighting. You need to have a soft light. The outdoor light makes you look washed out. Any of you been in part of a Zoom meeting where the background, the person's dark because the background is behind them and the sun, and it looks like they're in a witness protection program? So you don't want to do those kinds of things. But I'm learning this, you guys. So here I am, this professional putting on presentations, and I've just today have got that microphone, or the camera and the microphone higher, and I've got my soft lighting. I tried a bunch of bulbs and tried to get the right lighting, and it's the nuances that you're going to learn over time, because really you are your brand. So whether you're self-employed or not, you're putting out a message about yourself. I just learned today that Skype has a fuzzy background feature that you can actually turn out your entire background without a green screen, without having to have this professional background. I used that this morning. So there's tips you're going to learn. Just go slow to go fast. I love working from home. It is work-life balance. I can't tell you enough. I've struggled, but in the end, I love it, because with young kids, you can be there for them. You get to work out. You get to have your meals ahead, you know, thinking about good meals, being healthy. So there's just more advantages than disadvantages. It's combating that loneliness and finding ways to connect are the pieces that I would add to this conversation. And one other thing is that please turn your cameras off, turn them away, put a piece of tape on them. I firmly believe we're being hacked, that we can be looked into at any time by anyone. And so I've learned to do that every day, that even in between meetings, that I've got that thing. The mic is off and the camera, I actually put a piece of tape over it and make sure that I'm not, I don't have anyone in my home that's not welcome. So those are some of my tips, Amanda, that I'll share with now.
Well, thank you. I do have, we haven't gotten any questions in the chat yet. So if any of you that are here participating right now do have any questions for the 3 of them, please feel free to put them down in the chat there so we can ask them. But I had one for just general knowledge. Do you have any tips for someone who is having trouble staying on track at home? You know, getting sidetracked by the pets or by not, you know, having anybody watching you. So why do I have to sit at a computer for 8 hours? Like, I'm going to go and watch TV for a little bit and then go for a walk and then maybe come back and do some laundry and then do a little bit of work, but then go back outside and do something else. Do you have any tips for that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I have a couple people in my life who are better working in bursts, and that works for them, and they have a job that allows that, so they can, you know, work for 2 hours and go for a walk, and work for 2 hours and make food, and work for 2 more hours, and they get in their hours and they're productive that way. I'm not. I know I can't do that, and I found for me, being as mindful as I can about eliminating distractions. So like, don't let myself see that giant pile of laundry that I know is there, and having it out of sight, out of mind helps. For like pets, right before this call started, I really truly locked all of my pets out of this room because they will come in and take over this meeting, and it's incredibly distracting. For me, I know I love when other people's pets interrupt meetings because they're cute and funny, and it's my distraction that I don't want to deal with. But for me, it's that out of sight, out of mind that I find really helpful. And to echo both Cynthia and Diane lists and like ranking those lists of this is critical, this is less critical. And now is so different than it was 3 months ago. And so I really can say my brain is allowing things. I'm being a little more gracious with myself and how I'm feeling, and recognizing that, okay, if I get this done by Thursday instead of Tuesday, it's okay. Just being a little more kind to my heart and my brain.
I would agree with that too, Emily, and having that compassion towards yourself. You are much more productive if you've actually had time to yourself, and studies have revealed that. I used to be stringent on what I did when I did things, but now I find I have a tremendous burst of energy Sunday evening. I come in and out of the job during the day. But if I have that list that I have to get done, then I have to actually monitor my own time. But the weather's really important to me. So when the sun is out, Emily, I'm out for a walk. That's got to happen when Mother Nature says it. So I'm much more flexible about the work-life balance, and working from home really gives you a great opportunity.
Yeah. One thing that has worked for me is just dangling carrots in front of myself, as dumb as that might sound, but I'm kind of deadline driven, and especially in writing projects that I'm working on, I set thresholds that I need to pass, and then I'll let myself go do this. And I find that sometimes when I'm really lacking motivation, that can get me through. If I really, right now, I'm dying to go check on an airfare to Morocco that I saw this morning. It's so cheap, really, really cheap. But I have this and a couple other things I need to do, and then I'll let myself do it. So I make deals with myself, and that kind of moves me through those really distracted times, I think.
Wonderful. So we do have a couple of questions.
Really quick.
Yeah.
So this isn't something that I have had to struggle with. And so I just want to recognize that I have a few friends who have different disabilities, and their comments on working from home have been really kind of opposite to what I'm dealing with, which is having, emotional stuff that we're working through, but the issues of I don't have to figure out how to deal with these steps in the morning or sit at a desk that's not my size. And so I think that there are some things that people I've been working with directly with Main Street that they've been able to say, I can accomplish things differently because I feel safe at home to get these projects done. I just think that's something really important that's worth mentioning that I don't think any of us presenting today deal with, but having those disabilities, maybe there's opportunities for us as businesses and colleagues to learn from each other about how we can be helpful and take this weird blip as a cool learning experience.
And I want to add just to Cynthia's comment too. I'm the same way, Cynthia. I need to play games with myself and have little prizes at the end. But I spoke to a colleague recently who's just the opposite. She said, no, Diane, I need to do yoga in the morning. I need to do these things in the morning that are fun. And then I'm motivated to do the hard things. And that surprised me because I always did the reward at the end. She does the reward at the beginning, and it really works for her. So you're learning right now from all three of us that there's so many ways to approach this.
Definitely. So I have a question here that says, this question is about staggered office shifts. Some of us are in and out of the office. What tips do you have for people going back and forth, keeping things organized and making sure you bring what you need in each setting?
So I'm obviously not going to my office, but we have an office in St. Paul that is in the Landmark Center, if folks are familiar with it. So it's a big public building with many, many offices. The Landmark Center itself required a specific protocol to be set into place by each business that goes in. So we worked through our plan, and even things like everybody checks in when they're going in. There's not a specific set shift, so people have that flexibility to go when they kind of want to, but there is a mandate that you say, hey, I'm going to be in the office from 10 to 2, so people can stagger their times a little bit. Being very cautious about saying like, hey, if I'm here, we're going to try to be in these 2 different spaces rather than in the same space, 6 feet apart from each other at a desk, if we can be 20 feet apart from each other. The last is just being really vigilant right now about sanitizing. When we're dealing with audit stuff right now, just normal audit things, but that is requiring everybody to use the scanner. And just being careful about, we're doing a really good job of wiping down the printer scanner every time we do it, and have a little tracking chart of, like, you know, when you go into public bathrooms and they're like, this restroom was last cleaned at 11:42, like a chart like that, just so that everybody can see that visual of, this is when someone was here and this is what they did. It just helps people feel better.
Wonderful. So I have another question here that says, is there one thing that you have purchased or splurged on that has really helped you with your work at home?
Great question. I love my remote camera. So I don't use a laptop camera. I have a camera, and then I can actually show different parts of my the scenery that I have outside, and it's just so much more flexible. And then a microphone is very helpful also. So that's something I was surprised that I would appreciate.
I have a headset that I bought. I'm not wearing it right now, but that if I'm gonna be on a Skype meeting for a long time, or a meeting like this for a long time, it really is very helpful.
I have both a setup for standing up and a really good office chair. If working at, that's more of a permanent thing though. Like, I know I'm here all the time, so having that really good office chair makes a big difference than sitting at a kitchen chair.
Wonderful. And then we have one more that says, do you have any suggestions on how to engage your team when they are all working from home?
I just wrote a newsletter on this. So yes, I have a ton of ideas about that, and maybe I can share it with the group. It's all about staying connected in a disconnected world. And I believe firmly that a business should have unmeetings. And these are meetings that have no purpose, you guys, except to connect. That is its purpose. So you say it's a purpose. But it's really going around and asking each person, there's several things you can do. You know, something as simple as, how is this pandemic? What surprised you about working from home? Or how do you feel about this? Or what can we learn from this? And what actions might we take based on that learning? And other activities include fun things like meeting outdoors, introducing your cat, what's your favorite hat for the day, doing a treasure hunt during a break. And these are all ways to connect. It doesn't have to be in large groups. You could have subsections that are actually meeting for fun. And you can have one-on-ones, like you used to go out and have coffee and go for a walk. Why not do that in a Zoom setting? And so it's actually intentionally making meetings that aren't meetings, but purely to connect, because we need it more than ever. Efficiency isn't always job one. You know, I've been a boss too. I know I want my people to be productive. So I get that. But right now, in this time in our lives, we have got to think of the human component of this and be less concerned sometimes with efficiencies and more with the human touch. And these kinds of activities really help.
That's great. I would agree with that. I mean, who doesn't want to have an unmeeting? Well, I don't see any more questions. So if anybody has any, now's the time to ask them. Otherwise, we are going to let these ladies get back to working from home, and let everybody else go ahead and get on with their day as well. The session was recorded, so if you had to pop in or pop out and want the recording, just let me know and I can send it over to you via email. So I would like to say thank you to all of our presenters today for taking the time to present to us, and thank you to everybody that attended, and hopefully everybody can walk away with something new that they learned on how to work at home a little bit more effectively.
Thanks,
Thank
Emily,
you.
Cynthia, and Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you.